As you find your seats, let me again say good morning to you, church. It feels like it's been a while. I got to come back on a really fun week of VBS, and so it was so sweet to watch over 600 kids be on our campus, hundreds of leaders, and those kids feeling loved and cared for, pointed to Jesus. It was amazing. Plus, those kids, through lemonade stands and asking grandparents, however it was, but their offerings to the Pearl House in Ghana to help those young girls grow up safe and provided for, they raised $11,617 to support that. Amazing. Yeah. I also want to say a special thank you. There were many people who served all week, and so thank you to them. But also, there's a group of women, about 8 or 9 of them, that work nearly all year on making VBS great. And so those leaders do an incredible job to set it up in a gospel-driven, fun, exciting, creative kind of way. And so can we just say thank you to those women who have done a great job every year? Thank you to them, yeah. Today, though, we begin a summer-long series through Hebrews chapter 11. Now, we have been in Hebrews since January, and we've blasted through chapters 1 through 10, looking at how Jesus is better. Well, the way chapter 10 ended was with a sense of urgency. Both Dan and Brandon over the last 2 weeks so well reminded us that because of all of the truths of God speaking to us through Hebrews 1 through 10, because of all of the theology of Jesus being better, that means we should not shrink back. We should not drift. We should not fade away in our faith. Instead, Hebrews 10:39 reminds us, we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but we are those who have faith and preserve their souls. It's saying we are to fix our eyes on Jesus so that we would be encouraged to endure. We would be encouraged to not shrink back when faced with trials, but instead we are able to draw near to God in the middle of it. Well, now in chapter 11, instead of pointing us to a principle, the author of Hebrews points us to people, to real people, with real names in real circumstances, who actually lived that kind of way, who didn't shrink back, but instead drew near to God and lived by faith. It's the author saying to those original hearers and to us, you think this can't be done? You think it's impossible to hold fast? I know you're facing some really difficult situations, but do you think it's impossible for you to hold fast? Let me show you centuries of people who did it. That's what we're going to see in Hebrews chapter 11. Because of their faith, they were able to hold fast. First, though, we need to define what faith actually is. Hebrews 11 starts with that. Look at verses 1 and 2 here. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it, the people of old received their commendation. Now, there's a couple of things going on here. First, there's a definition of faith. He's saying, here's what faith is. And then he's giving a preview of what he's going to talk about the rest of the chapter, these people of old who received commendation for their faith. And so let's start with that definition of faith, as this translation says it, verse 1, the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Now, we live in a culture where faith gets confused with feeling. I just feel like God's gonna come through for me. Or our certainty in our assurance of eternity, our certainty in that wavers based on how we're feeling, what we went through. We were at camp last week or whatever it is. Like you're feeling really certain and other times you're not feeling. But that's not what the author was describing here. The Greek word translated assurance does not point to your emotional confidence. It points outward to the reality of the thing you're hoping for. And in fact, some translations, yours might say this, they put this as substance instead of assurance. That faith is the substance of things hoped for. I think that's actually closer to what this is getting at, because what that means then is that faith is not the feeling you have about a thing. Faith is the standing on the thing itself. Right? Faith is not the feeling you have about a thing. Faith is the actual standing on the thing itself. I mean, just think about this floor that I'm standing on. I'm not standing on my confidence in the floor. I'm standing on the floor, right? My faith is in the thing, not in my assurance or certainty about the thing. Again, so often we confuse faith with feelings, that if I don't feel something, then it must not be enough faith. We've got to be careful with that. This is teaching us that faith is substance, not sentiment. It's not just feelings, because that wavers. Faith is substance, not sentiment. Maybe this other way, putting it a different way, will help you a little bit. You take the reality of God's promises, his character, maybe his word, the gospel, like take all of that, all that God is, his character, who he is, what he's done, what he's promised, what he's going to do, all that. Take all that is solid ground regardless of what you feel right now. Like, does that make sense? So that's what we're saying. Faith is substance, him, not sentiment, what I feel about that, because that wavers. Faith is that itself. And what we're going to see throughout Hebrews 11 is these ordinary people, right? These are not superheroes. These are ordinary people like you and me. These ordinary people from centuries ago received commendation for that kind of faith. For that faith. Because they couldn't often see the end result. And they were feeling all kinds of emotions throughout the process. And yet they stood on the floor. They stood on the floor. They said, my faith is not in how I'm feeling right now. My faith is in that, him, and what he has promised. What about you? What about you? Are you waiting to feel faith before you obey? Because it might not come. Are you waiting to feel 100% certainty before you believe that thing or you move that direction? Are you waiting to get that 100% feeling? It's backwards. Faith acts on the reality of God's word first. Then the feeling often does come of faith. Once that floor holds, then you start to feel the faith that comes with it. But the faith itself is not in your feeling. The faith is in the thing, God himself. Yet here's what the author does here. He's defined faith. This passage is called, this whole of chapter 11 is so-called Hall of Faith, right? So that doesn't help us because we think these are superheroes, like the Hall of Fame in football. We could never do that. Well, this is different. These are ordinary people. But he starts here, he doesn't begin it with a person. He defined faith, said this is what it is, and then he starts with creation. Look at verse 3 again. By faith, right? So the whole thing's about faith. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. meaning God made everything out of nothing. So why did he start with creation instead of a person? Here's why. I think he started like this because before you can trust God with your trials, with your marriage, with your life and death, you must trust him with the cosmos. And here, the point here is that that faith has a foundation, and it goes far beyond, all the way before Genesis 1. The faith we're talking about, again, is not a sentiment, not a feeling. There's a foundation, and it goes back before Genesis 1, creation. Here's what I mean. If you believe that this God who made everything out of nothing, if you believe that God made everything out of nothing, then why do small things in our lives often feel too big for God? I think that's why he starts with creation. Because if we believe that, by faith, that God created everything that is here, not out of stuff forming into something else, out of nothing, just speaking a word and it happens. If we believe God did that, why do small things in our lives feel too big for God? Why does it feel impossible that he can direct your career? Why does it feel impossible that he can heal your marriage? Why does it feel impossible that he can carry you through that cancer diagnosis? Why does it feel impossible that he can help walk you through the classmates that are hard in your school? Why does it feel impossible? That's what we're talking about with this faith idea. One author said this way: faith is a redirecting of our sight. So we have this vision in our lives, all we're looking at. He's saying it's getting ourselves out of the focus and getting God into the focus. That old hymn, right? Turn your eyes upon Jesus, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. You're lifting your eyes, you're lifting your sight, you're putting your focus on the one who created everything out of nothing, so the things of this earth start to seem a little less heavy. Again, we're not talking about better feeling, we're talking about better seeing. But granted, when you're dealing with God, the reality is that you might not see much. Like, you can't see Jesus physically walking around. You can't physically see what happens after death. You may not see physical healing in this life. But faith begins where the visible world ends. Faith begins where the visible, as this is talking about here, the visible world ends. Faith begins there. Let me give you an example, right? I don't need faith to believe that this table is black. I can see it. And we could go through the room and do all kinds of things. Like, I don't need faith to believe that because I can see it. But I certainly need faith to believe eternity, to believe what happens after death, to believe heaven and hell. I need faith to believe that. You certainly need faith to believe that he will carry you through that trial that you're facing right now, because you can't see what's on the other side of it. That's faith. Where the visible world ends, that's where faith begins. And that's why verse 3 is so critical. He's talking about things that are created that were not before, right? Out of nothing. He's giving us a picture of invisible, creating visible things. And so first, yes, verse 3 is apologetically the cosmological argument for God, that everything had a start, which means there was someone who started it. That's the cosmological argument for God. But this is so much more than that too. This is so much more. This is pastoral medicine. Because when your world seems like it's crumbling, you've got to come back to this. You've got to come back to this, that the same God who made something out of nothing is the one you're trusting right now. When your world seems like it's falling apart, you have to have something that's solid, and the unseen is far more real than the seen, and so trust him in the middle of it as you're facing what seems like it's gonna crumble you. You've got a God that you're trusting in who made something out of nothing. Faith. Now again, I know you might be sitting there thinking, okay, John, that sounds good. I know that is true in a lot of cases, but you don't know my situation, man. You don't know what I'm facing. I just don't feel like that can work for me. Well, thankfully, the author of Hebrews then, from this point forward, gives us example after example of men and women who did believe God like that, who did trust him in the middle of chaos, who did have this kind of faith when they couldn't see the outcome on the other side. He gives us examples, starting in verse 4 and all the way through the end of the chapter, which will take us through the end of the summer. We will see examples of faith meant to build up our faith, where you and I will be able to relate to at least one of these stories, to be able to see like, oh, it's possible. Faith is possible in the middle of what I'm facing right now. We're not talking about the moment they got born again. Like we're assuming that's already happened. This is talking about how they lived by faith, what it looked like in day-to-day life, and that is meant to encourage us to walk the same race. Here's the first one. Goes back nearly all the way to the beginning, to Genesis chapter 4, involving Adam and Eve's first children. Now, if you remember Genesis 3:15, the first evidence of good news, the gospel, that God promised Eve that one of her children would come to crush the head of the serpent who had deceived them. The first gospel. And so Adam and Eve have their first child. His name is Cain. And you can imagine that Eve thought, this is the one. God's given me a son who's gonna crush the head of the serpent. This is the answer. Things didn't turn out that way. It was actually Abel, her second son, who did live by faith, and it got him murdered by his brother for it. Now let's just sit there for a second. Abel's faith did not protect him from Cain's violence. Contrary to what our Christian bubble might think, Abel's faith did not earn him a long, peaceful life. It just didn't. What it did earn him, though, was God's commendation. You saw it right here, Hebrews 11. It earned him God's commendation, and it earned him a voice that still speaks to us thousands of years later. This is what faith looks like when it costs you something. And when you go back and study that later today, Genesis 4, you'll read that passage. It was never about the offering. Like, because they both offered things to God. They were both processing through this action, this step. But it was about the heart. It was about the heart behind the offering. Because Cain transacted with God, but Abel worshiped. Abel was worshiping. Cain was transacting. Abel was worshiping as he gave. Cain wanted God's blessing without God's lordship. Abel just wanted God. I just want God. I'm gonna bring my best. I'm gonna bring the first fruits. Cain was like, I just have to bring something. Transactional versus worship. Listen, don't we have the same temptation every day to get transactional with God? And I'll admit it, I've thought this in my own mind before. Some of you may have even walked in here today with this, man, I'm gonna give God an hour and he's gonna give me a good week. Is that not transactional? God, I'm gonna do this for you, you better do this for me. That's what Cain was doing. That's what we are tempted to do. No, it's not about the form of the offering, because you could sit here and mouth the words and you could give and serve and all the things you're supposed to do on Sundays. You could do that. The form is right, but it's never about the form. It's about the heart behind it. It's a heart that says, God, you're worthy of my everything. You're worthy of everything I have. You're worthy of even the cost to suffer to follow you. I'm gonna follow you no matter what. That's the heart of worship that God is looking for. That's what Abel had that Cain didn't have. And here's the other part. We learn about this from Abel. Faithfulness does not make you immune to suffering. Faithfulness merely makes suffering have a point. It makes it matter. It means God can use it in your life and others' lives. As you are faithful to God, no matter the cost, he will use it. That's what faithfulness does. It doesn't mean you don't suffer. It just means it turns it into something meaningful. Abel worshiped by faith, even when it cost him. There's another example of faith from early in Genesis, this time with a man named Enoch. Look again at verse 5 here in Hebrews 11. By faith, Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death, and he was not found because God had taken him. Now, before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. Now, we find Enoch's life in Genesis chapter 5. And all we get on Enoch is just a couple verses in the middle of all these death notices. You go read Genesis 5, it's like, this guy lived for this many years, and then he died. This guy lived for this many years, and he died. It's like over and over and over. And then Enoch, one little verse in there, I'll read it in a second, and then this guy lived for this many years, and he died. And it's just over and over and over again. But this, we get to Enoch, Genesis 5:24. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Like, no death. God just took him to heaven. Now, that's wild, isn't it? Like, just one verse out of nowhere. You wish the Bible would give us more on this kind of stuff, right? Like, I want to find that guy someday. It's like, hey, what even happened? How'd that work out? Was there a door? Like, I don't know. Somehow. But I think there's enough here that we can learn something. I do. Because when we go all the way back to the first translation, this was written in Hebrew originally. The first translation into Greek language took this verse in Hebrews 11, and it said, walking with God that we have, it translated it instead as well-pleasing to God. Which I think is interesting because it links it to then Hebrews 11 verse 6, which remember what that says, without faith it is impossible to please God. For whoever would draw near to God must believe he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. So there's a link here, I think, that we would often miss. And the principle we need to learn from Enoch is this. Then when we put those two together, we can learn walking with God and pleasing God are the same thing. There's no difference. As you walk with God, you are pleasing God. As you are pleasing God, you're walking with God. Those are one and the same thing. And we need to think about walking a little bit. Walking is not a sprint. It's walking. Walking is not a performance. I think there's race walking in the Olympics, which is always awkward to watch, but like that's not what we're talking about here. Like when you're walking down the street, it's not a performance. You're not showing off for anyone else. It is daily, consistent, directional movement towards someone you love. Eugene Peterson called it long obedience in the same direction. That's what a walk with God is. But just think about, again, what it means to walk with someone you love. Like you're going to stay close to them. You're going to move in the same direction. You're going to listen to one another. You're not going to like disappear for a couple days and then jog to catch back up to them. You're going to walk with someone you love, staying close together at the same pace. And when you think about Enoch, he didn't have a Bible, he didn't have a church, he didn't have a small group. All he had was a walk with God. And after 300 years of it, God apparently decided that walk could just keep going past the boundary of death straight into heaven. That's how close Enoch's walk was with God. But when it blends, that well-pleasing idea blends into verse 6, notice what verse 6 does for us. It gives us the two-part content of what that true faith and that walk really looks like. Look at verse 6. Again, it's not just a theological affirmation that I believe in God. It's a relational confidence that he's there, he's good, he's going to be worth it when I walk with him wholeheartedly. Because if you go ask the majority of our city right now, do you believe in God? The answer is yes. Do you believe in God? Yeah, of course I believe in God. Why wouldn't I? Like 80 to 90% of people would say that. But they're not walking by faith, right? They're not walking in this kind of way, this relational confidence to look at God that they say they believe in, that you say you believe in, that he's there, he's good, and coming to him is worth it. I'm gonna walk with him fully, wholeheartedly. That is walking by faith. Think about your faith today. Is it that kind of walk? Intimately connected with God, just say, hey, where are you going? I'm going with you. I'm staying at your pace. I'm right with you. I'm listening to you. You're listening to me. We're back and forth. We're intimately loving one another. Like Enoch gave us the example, walking with God. Is that the way it is for you? Or is it this kind of sprint stall? Start, stop. Really passionate for a season, disappear for longer. Enoch's commendation from God here in Hebrews 11 is available to every one of us. Because it wasn't about how great a man Enoch was, how impressive his walk was, that we could never do. He's this hero we could never find. He was just seeing his God as the impressive one, and I'm gonna walk with him. That's it. I'm just gonna stay in lockstep right next to him. Nothing else is gonna force me to waver. I'm right here with him. Where you go, I go. Let's do this. I'm gonna stay tight, close to God. That is what got Enoch commended by God. That's what pleased God, was a simple walk where we get one verse in Scripture about it. Simple walk together with his God. That's available to you too, church. Enoch walked with his beloved. And finally, we get to Noah here in Hebrews 11, whose story we find back in Genesis 6 and beyond. And Hebrews 11:7 describes what faith for Noah looked like. It says, by faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this, he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. Most people are familiar with Noah and the ark, that whole story. But notice what was being commended here. Noah was commended for his faith, which again for Noah, we saw it, was both a belief and an obedient action. Noah believed that what God said was true. Even when I can't see it, even if I don't know what the result would be, I'm gonna believe him, and then he built something in response. And let's just think about this scene for a second. Like, think about Noah. He was 500 years old when he got this command from God. You might think you're old. That's old, right? 500 years old, gets this command. It took him decades to build this thing. Like, not just a short little, I'm gonna follow God for 6 weeks, like decades. He had to keep hammering away. And he was living in a land that before this time had no rain in its recorded history. Okay. Noah had every reason to hesitate, to wait for more data, to ask for a sign like normally we would probably. Instead, he just picked up a hammer, started to work. And Noah, as he did so, he was a walking, building, sweating contrast to everyone else around him. That's what it means here, that he was condemning the world by this, that his life was the sermon, and everybody else around him, as soon as the flood came, nobody could say that they were not warned by what Noah had been doing for decades. The way he'd been living his life by faith, trusting God, he was condemning them through that. But that's the point. The point here is the example of faith for Noah was that in his reverent fear of God, he just began to work. He just got to work. In faith, he said, okay, start sawing, start hammering, let's go. That's what he was commended for, his faith to just begin working. Now, what's interesting is that Jesus actually used Noah's faith also to bring people to a sense of judgment. This is in Matthew 24, verses 37 through 39. Listen to how Jesus uses this. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark, and they were unaware until the flood came, swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. And man, I was reading that this week, just began to think about myself, about us. Are we just as comfortable today as those people were before Noah? Are we just as distracted? eating and drinking, giving in marriage, being like just all the things of normal life, going about your life, going about your day? Are we just as domesticated as those people outside the ark were? And they were so blinded from what they'd been warned about? Man, are we the same way? Or are we building something in response to what God has said? See, the question is not whether we believe theologically that Jesus is returning. The question is whether we're living our lives like we believe that. Like we've been warned, he said, I'm coming back. Here's what it's gonna look like. Here's what I'm gonna do. Are we living like that's true? Or are we just wasting our lives, distracted? Because what God told Noah to do seemed completely unreasonable, didn't it? What is God asking you to build? Something to obey, a command, a call to obey. What is he asking you to build that seems unreasonable right now? Like maybe it's a hard conversation you've been putting off. Maybe it's a financial step to say, I'm gonna invest in God's kingdom. When your financial guy would say, man, that sounds terribly unreasonable. You shouldn't do that. But you know God is leading you to that. Is that a step to take? Or maybe it's stepping up publicly as a Christian at school or at work, knowing that could bring ridicule, and you're saying, you know what, I don't care. I'm gonna do it because I know God's calling me to it, even though it's gonna cost me. Remember, Noah did not get commended merely for his good theology. He got commended for picking up the tools. Remember what Hebrews 10:38 said? The righteous shall live by faith. That is active, that is visible, that is obedient, that is living by faith. Three quick examples setting us up for what's coming the rest of the chapter. Abel, Enoch, Noah. A worshiper who died, a walker who didn't, and a worker who was mocked. Three examples of faith, three commendations, but one shared commendation. They pleased God. They pleased God, not by feeling the right things, not by having an easy life. They pleased God by taking him at his invisible word and acting on it. I don't know what's coming. I don't know what's on the other side of this. I don't know how to follow through with this, but God, I'm gonna do what you said to do. That's what this whole series has been building toward. Jesus is better. It's not just enough to know that he's the better covenant, the better sacrifice, the better priest. You need to live like it, to worship like Abel, to walk like Enoch, to work like Noah. But don't get overwhelmed, because the same founder and perfecter of their faith is showering you with mercy and grace and power to live the same kind of way that they did. Because this kind of faith is not just past. It's today. It's tomorrow. It's faith. When we step out in it, God shows up in it. You heard Joe talk earlier about ministries of Jesus. That was a step of faith. that this church, a group of people, saw Jesus say, Luke 4, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. And they said, why aren't we doing that? And so we're gonna obey it. We don't know what it's gonna look like, how much it's gonna cost, but we're going to obey what he said to do. 25 years later, we have story after story of miracles that happen still every day over in that building across the parking lot. Including in this one young man who came to Ministries of Jesus just a few months ago, who has a story of faith like Abel, like Enoch, like Noah. Kaio has a story of faith that will encourage us. So watch this with me.
Hi, my name is Caio. I am originally from Brazil, but I've been living in Oklahoma for the past 10 years. One of the most common questions that people ask me is, what brought me to Oklahoma? When I was 20 years old, I found out that I didn't know Christ. I only knew the church, but in 2014 I came to meet him, and that changed everything in my life. I surrendered my plans and my dreams, including soccer. I said yes, I obeyed. A few months later, I found out that God was calling me for ministry. I started receiving some opportunities to go play soccer in the United States for college soccer. At first, I did not understand. I was like, man, is this temptation? I started praying, asking God for guidance. God finally spoke, and God said, be brave and courageous. I'm sending you to this place. I'm giving you this land. And God confirmed that same scripture, I think 3 or 4 times in a window of 2 days through different people and different situations. I came to Oklahoma with no English. I only had $100 in my pocket. And about 2 weeks before coming, he also gave me another word saying why he was bringing me here. He told me that I would come here to plant a church. So yeah, came to college, didn't have the funds to pay the remaining of the tuition or even for food or rent. I went to pray, asking the Lord, I know you're gonna do something. That same night, before going to bed, I received a text message from a guy that I just met a few days before that situation. The guy didn't know me, didn't know my story. And he sent me a text basically saying, Kai, I don't know exactly why, but I will pay your rent this month. And I have a few things to do. If you can come help me, I will also give you some money. And I was like, man, God is using this guy, and I'm so thankful. So after a few months, I started a small group. It was in Portuguese at the time. And we started meeting like once a week, talk about the Bible. But in 2021, that's when the church started to take the real shaping as a church. We start growing, and we start having and feeling the need for a building. And during that time, there was this little street shop. So after a few months of praying and asking the Lord if that was the right place and option, God gave some words of confirmation and said that we should rent that space. I went there, I talked to the people, we negotiated the price, and I signed the contract. I got the keys, I went back home. For some reason, I had this heaviness, that feeling that something was not right. So then I went to my office and I went to pray. And my prayer was exactly that, Lord, why am I feeling like that? And when I was praying, God spoke deep in my heart. God was like, I wanted you to rent 2 units. And I immediately was respond, but Lord, we can barely afford 1. And for sure we cannot afford 2. And God said, you did everything by faith so far. You're gonna stop now? And it was like a punch in my stomach on that moment. And I was like, all right, Lord, forgive me, I'm sorry. But please, give me some confirmation that it's really you and not just something from my mind. When it comes to the finance, I don't know, maybe somebody out of nowhere bringing an offering. Doesn't matter how much it is. And I never saw that place filled. So if we really need a big space, let this space be filled, like full, at least once. In the following Sunday, we invited a missionary. It was a wonderful service, and at the end, she came to me and gave me a $1,000 check. And I was like, it's supposed to be the other way around. We giving you an offering for coming here and sharing with us. But she responded, no, but God put it in my heart that I had to share this with you. And in the following Sunday, when it was finally time for the sermon, and I went up front and I looked to the church, like all seats were taken and people were getting the office chairs in the back. The feeling I had was like God did not have to answer or to do anything, but he was so merciful with me. But on that moment I understood God was telling me to rent 2 units, even if we didn't have enough people and even if we didn't have enough funds. So next morning, Monday morning, I went to the office and I signed a new contract and got the keys, and we had 2 units. And now we've been in that building for about 2.5 years, and it's already getting tight, like too small for us. So after all that, there are a few things that I know for sure. One is God is real, he's present, he's also very, very faithful. He fulfills his word, his promises. Today our church has been growing, and I'm not talking just about numbers, I'm talking about the growth and the transformation of the people. They are involved, like committed with small groups and reading the Bible plan. So it's been amazing to see the fruits of what started with a little yes years ago. I always remember that word that say, without faith, it's impossible to please the Lord.
Praise God for that. Yeah. Faith is not just in the past. It's not just for the superheroes. Faith is today and tomorrow. Because your faith is not in yourself. Your faith is in the one who created everything out of nothing, the one who died to save you, the one who loves you more than you can ever imagine, who has an incredible plan for your life that's full of abundance, and that might include suffering, but will take you home with him forever. That's who your faith is in. But I don't want you to think that it's gonna only be, man, I gotta move countries, I gotta plant a church, I gotta start ministries of Jesus, this huge ministry impacting thousands a year. Like that's faith. Don't think that's only what we're talking about. It might be those things. Don't limit God. But faith also shows up in the small, daily decisions and actions, steps of obedience, faithful steps. And so what is faith for you today? What step of faith? What is the yes? To open your hands and put it on the table and say, okay, God, I don't know how it's gonna go. I don't know how it's gonna look. I'm probably gonna suffer. Yes. Because you're worth it, and I wanna walk with you. God's not sitting back here comfortable, just waiting, kind of passive. He is on the move. And faith means I'm joining him, stepping into it with him. Where are we going, God? So today is gonna be a different end to the service. Literally did not know at the end of the first service what we were gonna do. Just follow the Lord's leadership with this. And one of the things I love about our church is how as soon as we're done, people just stay and talk for 30 minutes, 60 minutes at times, and just enjoy the time and fellowship. If that's gonna be you today, it's gonna happen out there or outside. Because this in here, I believe, is a consecrated space today. It is every time we gather, but uniquely, God's doing something in your heart right now to say yes to something. Whether it's massive, public, or very quietly saying, I'm gonna give that up, I'm gonna take that step of obedience, I'm gonna do this again, I'm not gonna do this thing, like whatever it is, all of us, some step of yes in faith. Because God will always, always, always show up when you take that step. So we're gonna end today in a spirit of prayer. And so I'm gonna pray first. Feel free to stay right where you are as long as you need to. Maybe it's on your face before God, on your knees, praying up here with other people, praying where you're at with a group of people. Maybe it's whatever the Lord leads you to do. If you're ready to go, you can slip out at some point here in a little bit after I pray. You can slip out quietly, respectfully for those who are staying. If you're gonna talk and chatter, just head outside for that. But just to say, God, we're ready. I want you more than anything else. And just open your life, open hands, yes. I want you, God. Because of all you are, all you've done, I want you above all else. So again, I'm gonna pray. I invite you to pray with me. And then after that, if you're ready to leave, you can quietly leave. But if you're needing to stay or pray with someone up here, that's what this time is for, as long as you need it. There's no end. I'm not gonna play a bunch of music or anything after. It's just gonna end. And let the Lord lead as he needs to in that. So I invite you to pray with me now towards this.